Dear class 10, today we'll finish up this chapter number 6, that is photosynthesis, because we are almost towards the end of this chapter, that is importance of photosynthesis. Alright, the importance of photosynthesis includes mainly 2 points out here. They are provides food, that means it provides food and it provides oxygen. So it provides food to the entire world. As you all know that photosynthesis is the only process by which green plants make their own food and supply the food to the entire living world. Alright, so from this what we understand is that how important the green plants actually are. Alright, okay, so if the green plants were not there, then the living world would come to an end. Alright, so these green plants only have the capacity to carry out the process called photosynthesis. Alright, as you know that this photosynthesis is the process by which green plants make their own food. So before going into it, let me write its equation once. Alright, 6CO2 plus 12H2O, light energy. Okay, in presence of light energy with the help of chlorophyll, okay, to produce C6H12O6 plus 6 molecules of water and 6 molecules of oxygen. So this is the chemical equation of photosynthesis. Once you look at it, you can easily make out what actually the process is. Alright, see here, green plants. So green plants means plants having chlorophyll. Okay, make use of these raw materials, carbon dioxide, water and light energy to produce their food, their own food, that is C6H12O6, which means glucose. Alright, so this process of manufacturing of food itself is called photosynthesis. That way they make their own food called glucose, and this food is not limited to them only, but it goes to the entire living world via the food chain. Okay, via the food chain. So what is food chain then? So food chain is a food dependence system or food dependence chain in which green plants make their food by this process called photosynthesis and supply the food to the herbivores, and from herbivores it goes to the carnivores. Alright, and when these entire living things, whether it is green plants or herbivores or carnivores, die, okay, so after their death, their organic materials deposited in their body will be decomposed by the decomposers, which include bacteria and fungi. That means bacteria and fungi also directly or indirectly depend upon this process for their food, because they are getting the food from these organisms only after their death, because these organisms during their lifetime had got the food from or food by the process called photosynthesis only. So these decomposers also depend upon this photosynthesis only for their food. Alright, so that important it is. So as I was talking about the food chain, so food chain I was telling you a system or the food dependence system in which what happens, in which these green plants make their food by the process of photosynthesis, and when they are eaten up by the herbivores, the food from the green plants will be passed on to the herbivores, and from herbivores to the carnivores when carnivores eat them up. So this is called food chain, in which they believe in eating and being eaten system. Okay, the system where we find eating and being eaten. So that is actually the this your food chain. So by this food chain, the food will be going from this autotrophs or the producers are the green plants, to the herbivores, herbivores to carnivores, and finally to the decomposers after their death. So this is how we see all the living world being dependent on the photosynthesis only for their food, rather for their survival. Okay, because food is needed by all the living creatures. So if there is no food, means no one can survive. So food comes from ultimately the process called photosynthesis. So that important it is. So to make it more clear, let me go through some examples of these food chains. Okay, so here you see corns are eaten up by rat. Rat is eaten up by snake. So snake is eaten up by hawk. That means food from corns are going to rat, from rat to snake, and snake to hawk. Alright, see here. Corns being the products of green plants. Alright, store this glucose here. Okay, glucose here. So this glucose or this food will be passing on to rat when rat eats it up. So in the same way, the food from rat will be going to snake when snake will eats it up. In the same way, from snake to hawk. So in the second example, you see grass. Okay, grass you see being eaten up by rabbit. So that food from grass will be going to rabbit, and from rabbit to tiger when tiger eats it up. So in other two examples also you find the same. So in all types of food chain, there are different types of food chains there. Okay, but in all food chains you find the starting points to be the green plants. Okay, so corns, grass, wheat. In all other food chains also you find the starting points to be the green plants. So these green plants make their food by using the method called photosynthesis. Alright, so from them it will go to herbivores to carnivores, and after their death it will be going to the decomposers also. So that way we understand that the entire living world you see being completely dependent on the photosynthesis for their food. Okay, so number 2 we have provides oxygen. So your photosynthesis provides oxygen. So from this equation, I just want to take you through this equation once again. So here you see not only the food but also oxygen, 6O2. So oxygen you see being produced by this process only. Okay, oxygen being released to the atmosphere by this process only. By this photosynthesis only. Alright, so this oxygen is a life supporting gas. Okay, for all the living world. Okay, which is produced by this process only. Alright, scientists strongly believe that 2 billion ago, when there was no any form of life on the earth, there was no free oxygen in the atmosphere. Okay, there was no free oxygen in the atmosphere. Okay, but after what happened, the plants came into its existence. Then we find the animals having come to its existence. First plants came, then animals, because plants were able to carry out the process called photosynthesis, so that they were able to produce their own food, okay, which was also for the animals also. Then plants were able to release this free oxygen to the atmosphere also, which was needed by all the living creatures for their respiration. So that way we find this photosynthesis very important for this importantly 2 reasons, that is it provides food and it provides oxygen. Alright. Now we'll see carbon cycle, which is in your reduced or revised syllabus also. Carbon cycle. So carbon cycle actually is a series of chemical reactions in which carbon in the form of carbon dioxide is removed from atmosphere, okay, utilized by the living organisms in their body processes and returned it back to the atmosphere. So that is called carbon cycle. Let me write it once out here. Series of chemical reactions. A series of chemical reactions in which carbon in the form of carbon dioxide, okay, is removed from atmosphere, all right, utilized by living organisms in their body processes, and returned it back to the atmosphere. Okay, so is called carbon cycle. All right, see here. So carbon cycle, as I was telling you, a series of chemical reactions in which carbon in the form of carbon dioxide is removed from atmosphere, utilized by living organisms in their body processes, and returned it back to the atmosphere again, is called carbon cycle. Okay, so that means what happens, carbon is taken from the atmosphere, is utilized by the plants and animals, and giving back to the atmosphere again at the end. So that is called carbon cycle. So this carbon cycle includes a number of steps which I am going to explain one by one. Steps. Okay. Number one, we have photosynthesis. We have photosynthesis here, number one. All right. So photosynthesis, as you know, that we have already discussed also, in which what happens is that green plants collect carbon dioxide from atmosphere. Okay, collect carbon dioxide from atmosphere and make use of that carbon dioxide in making the glucose. In making what? The glucose. See, C6H12O6. See here. So in this glucose, what is there? Carbon is there. Carbon has been trapped from the atmosphere, okay, in the form of CO2. So that way it is removed from the atmosphere. All right. Second, we have food chain. We have food chains. Second, we have food chains. So in food chains, what happens is that the food which is there in the plant's body in this form, okay, glucose, starch, whatever, there is C, which means carbon. So this carbon now from plants will be going to the herbivores, and herbivores to carnivores. That means from plants to animals by the food chain. Okay, by the food chain. So that way it goes from plants to animals. So by the food chain. All right. Then we have number three. Respiration. So respiration, see here. So respiration, see, is another step or process in which what happens is that carbon which is there in the food, okay, this which is there in the food, see here, carbon cells. This carbon which is there in the food will be oxidized to release energy. To release what? Energy. So along with the release of energy, what also happens out there is that we find the release of carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere. For that, let me write the equation of respiration again here. Okay, C6H12O6 will be oxidized by this 6 molecules of oxygen. So there they may be needing respiratory enzymes. Okay, Okay, then 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. Now see here, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide here is now again going back to the atmosphere. It was taken from the atmosphere, now it's going back to the atmosphere again. Okay, so this how the cycle is taking place out. This carbon cycle is taking place out here there in the nature. See, 6O2, 6 CO2 plus 6 molecules of water and 38 ATP. 38 ATP, which means energy. 38 ATP, which means energy, which we have discussed there in class 9 itself. See here, respiration is the process in which glucose, C6H12O6. The glucose means here what is there? Carbon is there. Carbon being oxidized to produce energy, but along with the release of energy, what is also there? Carbon dioxide is also being released to the atmosphere. It is now going back to the atmosphere. That is another step of the carbon cycle. Then we have decaying. Number 4 is decaying. Decay or decaying. So in which what happens? So in decaying, what you find is that, so all the living creatures after their death, decay, okay, they decay, they get decomposed. So when they undergo decaying or decomposition, so from their body the carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere. Okay, so carbon dioxide is going now back to the atmosphere. It was taken from the atmosphere, okay, and was utilized in the form of in making the food. Now is again going back to the atmosphere by a number of processes out here, which includes respiration, decaying. Then another step again we have is we have combustion. We have combustion or burning. Combustion or burning. So anything, whatever it is there, if burns, okay, so from there which gas actually is released is carbon compounds. It may be carbon dioxide, it may be carbon monoxide. Okay, they are all released. So that way your compounds containing carbon will be released to the atmosphere by way of burning. So whenever anything, it may be there are so many fossil fuels in use. It may be your natural gas, your kerosene, diesel, petrol. All right, when they charcoal, coal, whenever they burn, which gas is released? No, it may be carbon dioxide, it may be carbon monoxide. So ultimately, carbon is going back to the atmosphere. All right, then heating limestone. Okay, heating limestone. So heating limestone. So limestone is a kind of rock, sedimentary rock. So this limestone is heated or burnt to produce lime in the lime kilns. In what? In the lime kiln. So lime kiln. So this lime kiln is a factory, in fact, where this limestone is burnt to produce lime. All right. So that way, when it is burnt, that time also the carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere. So that way, in this carbon cycle, what we have found is that the use of carbon dioxide, the removal of carbon dioxide from atmosphere in making the food by the process called photosynthesis. Then in the food chain, what we found is that in the food chain, that that carbon dioxide present in the food being supplied to the animals, from plants to animals. Okay, so that way they make use of this carbon or carbon dioxide. And also we know that carbon being a very, very important part of tissues. All right, so that way it is utilized. Carbon or carbon dioxide is utilized. Then by respiration, giving back to the atmosphere. Not only respiration, but there are some other processes as well. You see respiration, decaying, combustion, heating limestone. So by all these methods or the processes, ultimately we give this carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere. So this process of the removal of carbon dioxide from atmosphere and utilizing this in the life processes, then and returning it back to the atmosphere is called your carbon cycle. So this is how we conclude this chapter today, and hope you people must have understood it. Thank you very much.